The alarm bells were screaming so loud that Jake could barely think straight. Red lights flashed everywhere inside the small research ship as it spun out of control. Through space, he gripped his seat with white knuckles, watching through the window as a strange blue and green planet grew bigger and bigger. Come on, come on, he whispered to himself, frantically pushing buttons on the control panel. Nothing was working. The ship had been hit by some kind of space debris, and now all the systems were failing one by one. Jake was just 28 years old and had been working as a scientist for only 3 years. This was supposed to be his first solo mission, to study new planets. He never thought something like this would happen. The company had told him it would be a simple job. Fly to the planet, collect some samples, and come back home. Easy money, they said. But now his ship was falling like a rock toward this unknown world. And there was nothing he could do about it. The planet's surface was rushing up fast. Jake could see thick forests, sparkling rivers, and what looked like crystal mountains. At least it looked like he could breathe there if he survived the crash. Emergency landing protocol activated, the computer announced in its calm voice, which seemed ridiculous given the situation. Jake closed his eyes and held on tight as the ship slammed into the ground. The impact threw him forward against his safety belt. Metal groaned and twisted around him. Then everything went quiet. When he opened his eyes, smoke was filling the cabin. His head was pounding, and his left shoulder hurt badly. But he was alive. Through the cracked window, he could see alien trees swaying in a gentle breeze. The sky was a beautiful purple color with 2 suns shining down. Jake unbuckled himself and stumbled toward the emergency exit. The door was jammed, so he had to kick it several times before it finally opened. Fresh air rushed in, and he took a deep breath. It smelled like flowers and something else he couldn't identify. He climbed out of the wreckage and looked around. His ship was completely destroyed. Pieces of metal and plastic were scattered everywhere. Smoke was still rising from the engine section. The emergency radio was making a crackling sound. But when he tried to use it, nothing happened. Great, Jake muttered. Just great. He was stranded on an alien planet with no way to call for help. His rescue beacon was probably broken too. It could be weeks or even months before anyone came looking for him. The landscape around him was unlike anything he had ever seen. The trees had silver bark that seemed to glow in the sunlight. Their leaves were all different colors, some purple, some gold, some a bright blue. Strange flowers grew everywhere, and they seemed to be moving on their own. Even though there was barely any wind, Jake checked his supplies. He had some emergency food that would last maybe a week. His water recycler was working, so that wasn't a problem. His tablet computer had survived the crash, which was lucky because it had all his scientific equipment built in. He decided to set up a temporary camp near the wreckage, while he figured out what to do next. As he was gathering pieces of metal to make a shelter, he noticed something moving in the forest. At first, he thought it was just the strange plant swaying, but then he saw it again, definitely something moving between the trees. Jake stopped what he was doing and stared into the forest. There was definitely something there. Watching him, he could feel eyes on him, but he couldn't see exactly what it was. The shapes moved too quickly and stayed too far away. Hello, he called out. Feeling a bit foolish, is someone there? The movement stopped. Everything went quiet except for the sound of the wind through the alien trees. Jake waited for several minutes, but nothing happened. Maybe he was just seeing things because of the crash. His head was still hurting pretty badly. He went back to building his shelter, but he couldn't shake the feeling that he was being watched every few minutes. He would look up and scan the tree line. Sometimes he thought he saw shadows moving, but they always disappeared when he tried to focus on them. As the 2 suns began to set, the forest started to glow. Many of the plants had bioluminescent properties, creating an amazing light show. Jake had never seen anything so beautiful. Despite being scared and alone, he couldn't help but feel amazed by this incredible world. He managed to get a small fire going using some dry wood and his emergency lighter. The warmth felt good as the temperature started to drop. Jake sat by his fire, eating a nutrition bar and thinking about his situation. Tomorrow he would start exploring and try to find materials to repair his radio. Maybe he could also find some local food sources. The planet seemed to have a lot of life, so there might be fruits or other things he could eat. But tonight, he would rest and recover from the crash. As he lay down on his makeshift bed, Jake looked up at the alien stars. Two moons hung in the purple sky, both glowing with a soft white light. He was about to close his eyes when he heard something that made his heart race. It sounded like voices, soft, musical voices coming from the forest. They were speaking in a language he had never heard before, but somehow it sounded almost like singing. Jake sat up and strained his ears to listen. The voices were definitely real, and they were getting closer to his camp. Jake barely slept that night. Every small sound made him jump. The singing voices had stopped after a while, but he knew someone or something was out there watching him. When the twin suns finally rose, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink, he felt relieved that the long night was over. He was eating his breakfast when they finally showed themselves. Three figures stepped out from behind the glowing trees. Jake's jaw dropped. They looked almost human, but not quite. They were tall and graceful, with skin that seemed to shimmer like pearls in the morning light. Their hair was long and flowing, and their eyes were larger than human eyes, with colors he had never seen before. What surprised Jake the most was that they all appeared to be women. They wore clothing that seemed to be made from the same material as the plants around them, living fabric that moved and changed color as they walked. The one in front raised her hand in what looked like a peaceful greeting. She said something in that musical language Jake had heard the night before. Her voice was beautiful, like wind chimes in a gentle breeze. Jake slowly stood up, keeping his hands visible so they would know he wasn't dangerous. "Hello," he said carefully. "I'm Jake. I'm from Earth." The three beings looked at each other and had a quick conversation in their own language. Then the leader stepped forward. To Jake's amazement, she spoke in English, though her accent was strange and some words seemed difficult for her. "You're male person?" she asked, tilting her head like a curious bird. Jake blinked in surprise. "Yes, I'm a man. You speak English. We learn from sky voices," she explained, pointing upward. "Many years we listen to sounds from stars. Your people send many words into space. We study and learn." Jake realized she meant radio and television signals that had traveled from Earth to this distant planet. These beings had been listening to human broadcasts and teaching themselves English. "I am called Zira," the leader said. "These are my sisters, Kaya and Nora." She gestured to the other two, who waved shyly at Jake. "Nice to meet you," Jake said, still hardly believing this was happening. "I crashed here yesterday. My ship is broken." Zira's eyes widened with concern. "You are hurt?" "Just a little," Jake said, touching his sore shoulder. "I'll be okay." The three women came closer, walking in a circle around Jake like he was the most interesting thing they had ever seen. They whispered to each other in their language, pointing at different parts of him. "Forgive us," Zira said. "We have never seen male before. In our world, we have only women. No males for many, many years." Jake tried to process this information. An entire civilization with no men. What happened to them? He asked. Zira's expression became sad. "Long ago, sickness came. All males became sick and went to stars. Only females survive. We learned to make new life without males. But we always wonder what males were like." Jake felt sorry for them and also realized why they were so curious about him. He was probably the first male any of them had ever seen in person. "You're covering," Kai said, pointing at Jake's torn flight suit. "It is not like our clothes. How does it work?" Before Jake could answer, Nora reached out and touched the zipper on his jacket. She pulled at it gently, fascinated by how it worked. Strange joining method, she said in her heavily accented English. Jake laughed nervously. "It's called a zipper. See, you pull it like this." He demonstrated by zipping and unzipping his jacket pocket. All three women gasped in delight. "Amazing," Zira exclaimed. "Your people make very clever things. Would you like to see our city?" Kaya asked excitedly. "Our people will want to meet you. You are like legend come to life." Jake looked back at his destroyed ship. There wasn't much he could do here anyway. Maybe these people could help him find a way to contact Earth. That would be great, he said. Thank you. The journey to their city was like walking through a fairy tale. Zira and her companions led Jake along paths that seemed to be made of crushed diamonds. The trees grew taller and more magnificent as they walked, and strange creatures flitted through the branches, some that looked like flying flowers, others like tiny dragons made of light. Your world is incredible, Jake said, looking around. In wonder, we are glad you find beauty in our home, Zira replied. Many generations have worked to keep harmony between all living things. As they walked, more of their people began to appear. Women of all ages came out from hidden pathways to get a look at Jake. Some were young, barely more than children, while others appeared to be elders with wisdom in their ancient eyes. All of them had that same shimmering skin and graceful way of moving. They whispered and pointed at Jake, but not in a mean way. They seemed genuinely fascinated and excited. Some of the younger ones giggled and hid behind trees when Jake looked their way. They are shy, Nora explained with a smile. You are first male they see. Very exciting for them. After an hour of walking, they reached the city, and Jake's breath was taken away. It was built entirely from crystal formations that grew naturally from the ground. The buildings spiraled upward like frozen tornadoes, catching and reflecting the light from the twin suns. Gardens filled with glowing plants were everywhere, and streams of clear water flowed between the structures. This is the most beautiful place I've ever seen, Jake said honestly. You honor us, Zira said. Looking pleased, as they entered the city, crowds began to gather. Soon Jake was surrounded by hundreds of women, all trying to get a closer look at him. They chattered excitedly in their musical language, and Jake could hear his name being repeated over and over. Some of them reached out to touch his clothes, fascinated by the different materials and textures. They had never seen synthetic fabrics before, only their living plant-based clothing. A few of them tugged gently at his sleeves and collar, trying to understand how human clothing was constructed. Please, Zira said to the crowd, give our guests some space. But the crowd's curiosity was too strong. More and more hands reached out to examine Jake's strange clothing. Someone pulled at his belt, trying to figure out how the buckle worked. Another person investigated the buttons on his shirt, amazed by this simple fastening method. Jake started to feel overwhelmed as dozens of hands explored his outfit. Ladies, he said, backing up a step, could you maybe not all grab at once? But they didn't seem to understand his discomfort. In their culture, physical examination was apparently a normal part of learning about something new. To them, Jake's clothes were like a puzzle they needed to solve. Suddenly, there was a ripping sound. Someone had pulled too hard on his already damaged flight suit, and a long tear appeared down the side. Then another tear, as more hands tugged at different parts of his clothing. Wait, Jake called out. But the excitement of the crowd had reached a fever pitch. They were so fascinated by his strange garments that they accidentally began pulling his clothes apart in their eagerness to understand them. Within moments, Jake found himself standing in the middle of the Crystal Plaza in just his underwear, surrounded by hundreds of alien women holding pieces of his torn clothing. They examined the fabric scraps with intense scientific interest, completely unaware that they had just created a very awkward situation. The entire crowd fell silent. Jake's face turned bright red as he tried to cover himself with his hands. Zira looked mortified. Oh no, she said, dropping the piece of his sleeve she had been examining. We have made terrible mistake. In our excitement to learn, we forgot about your customs. Jake tried to smile, even though he was embarrassed. It's okay, he said. I know you didn't mean to. You were just curious. But he couldn't help wondering what was going to happen next. The silence in the Crystal Plaza lasted only a few seconds before everyone started talking at once. The women realized what had happened and looked embarrassed. Some covered their faces with their hands. Others started apologizing in their musical language as Zira quickly removed her own outer garment, which looked like a flowing cape made of living fabric that changed colors as it moved. Please take this, she said, wrapping it around Jake's shoulders. I am so sorry for our people's actions. Jake pulled the strange material around himself. It felt warm and seemed to adjust to his body temperature automatically. Thank you, he said. And really, it's okay. I understand you were just curious. An elderly woman with silver hair approached them. Her skin had the same shimmer as the others, but her eyes held the wisdom of many years. She spoke to Zira in their language, her tone gentle but serious. This is Elder Thora, Zira explained. She leads our Council of Wisdom. She wants to apologize personally and invites you to stay in our city while we help repair your communication device. Elder Thora stepped forward and bowed slightly. Young traveler from distant star. She said in careful English, "We have acted without thinking. In our world, we share knowledge through touch and examination. We forgot that your people may have different ways." Jake was impressed by how respectful she was being. Elder Thora, please don't worry about it. Where I come from, we're curious about new things too. Sometimes curiosity gets the better of us. The elder smiled, and her whole face lit up. You have kind heart. This is good sign for friendship between our peoples. Over the next few hours, Jake was given a tour of the Crystal City. They showed him how their buildings grew from special seeds that formed living crystal structures. He learned that their technology was based on working with nature rather than against it. Zira stayed with him as his guide and translator. She seemed genuinely interested in learning about human culture, and Jake found himself enjoying their conversations. Tell me about Earth, she said as they sat by a fountain made of singing crystals. What is it like to have both men and women living together? Jake thought about how to explain it simply. Well, men and women often have different strengths and ways of thinking. When we work together, we can solve problems that neither could solve alone. We learn from each other. This sounds wonderful, Zira said with a wistful expression. Our people have grown wise and peaceful. But sometimes I wonder what we might have learned if our males had survived. Jake told her about families, about friendships between men and women, about how his own parents had worked as a team to raise him and his sister. Zira listened with fascination, asking questions about concepts that were completely foreign to her world. In return, she taught him about their society. They had eliminated war centuries ago and focused all their energy on science, art, and harmony with nature. Their technology was incredible, but it was all designed to work with living systems. Rather than replacing them, we learned to create new life using advanced methods, Zira explained. Each child is carefully designed to have the best qualities of her ancestors. But sometimes our elders wonder if we lost something important. When we lost the natural way of creating life, as the days passed, Jake found himself becoming part of their community. The initial awkwardness about the clothing incident was forgotten, as everyone got used to having him around. The younger women were especially curious about his stories of Earth and would gather around. Whenever he talked about his home planet, they gave him new clothes made from their living fabric, which was actually much more comfortable than his original flight suit. The material was soft, breathable, and seemed to clean itself. It also changed colors based on his mood, which the women found endlessly entertaining. Jake worked with their scientists to try to repair his communication equipment. Their technology was so different from Earth's that it took time to figure out how to make them work together. But gradually, they made progress. During the evenings, Jake would sit with groups of women and share stories. He told them about movies, about sports, about music from Earth. In return, they shared their own stories, songs, and art. Their music was unlike anything Jake had ever heard. It seemed to make the very air shimmer with beauty. He also learned about their history. Long ago, their planet had been visited by explorers from other worlds, but most had been hostile. The women had learned to hide their civilization and had been cautious about contact ever since. You are different, Elder Thora told him one evening. You came here by accident, not to conquer or take from us. Your heart is open to learning, not closed with fear or greed. Jake felt honored by her trust. These people had taken a huge risk by revealing themselves to him and welcoming him into their city. 3 weeks after his crash, Jake finally managed to get a signal through to Earth. The moment his radio crackled to life with a voice from home, he felt a mixture of joy and sadness. "Jake, thank goodness you're alive," came the voice of Captain Rodriguez, his mission commander. "We've been searching for you everywhere. What's your status?" Jake looked around at the Crystal City, at Zira, and the other women who had become his friends, and realized he wasn't sure how to answer that question. I'm fine, Captain," he said slowly, "but I have some incredible news to share. I've made first contact with an intelligent species." The excitement in Captain Rodriguez's voice was clear, even through the static. "That's amazing. Are they friendly? What are they like?" "They're incredible people," Jake said, looking at Zira, who was listening nearby. "They saved my life and welcomed me into their society. But Captain, this is delicate. They've had bad experiences with visitors from other worlds before." Jake spent the next hour explaining the situation, describing the Zolani civilization and their all-female society. He was careful to emphasize how peaceful and advanced they were, and how important it was to approach any future contact with respect and caution. "The rescue ship will be there in 4 days," Captain Rodriguez finally said. "But Jake, this discovery, this changes everything. Are they willing to establish diplomatic contact with Earth?" Jake looked at Zira questioningly. She had been learning more English every day and understood most of the conversation. "We will consider this carefully," she said, speaking into the radio herself. "But first, we must trust that your people will respect our world as Jake has respected it." Over the next few days, Jake found himself in an unexpected position. The Zolani Council asked him to serve as an ambassador, to help establish the first formal contact between their worlds. Earth's government, meanwhile, was eager to begin diplomatic relations with this advanced civilization. "I never expected my life to change like this," Jake told Zira as they walked through the Crystal Gardens one last time, before the rescue ship arrived. "Sometimes the best changes are the ones we never plan," she replied. "You came here as a scientist studying planets. Now you may become the bridge between two worlds." When the Earth ship finally appeared in the sky, Jake felt torn. He was excited to see his colleagues and tell them about his discoveries, but he was also sad to leave his new friends. The rescue team was amazed by the Crystal City and the Zolani people. They followed Jake's lead in being respectful and careful not to overwhelm their hosts. Elder Thara spoke to the Earth delegation through Jake as translator. "We are willing to share knowledge with your people," she said, "but we must do this slowly and carefully. Too much change too quickly can be dangerous for both our peoples." After long discussions, they agreed on a plan. Jake would return to Earth to brief the government and help prepare for formal diplomatic contact. Then he would come back as Earth's first ambassador to the Zolani world. As Jake prepared to leave, many of the women came to say goodbye. They had grown fond of their first male friend and were sad to see him go. "You will come back?" asked Kaya, one of the younger women who had become like a little sister to him. "I promise," Jake said. "This isn't goodbye forever. This is just the beginning of something amazing." Zira walked with him to the landing area where the Earth ship waited. "Thank you for showing us that not all visitors from the stars come with bad intentions," she said. "Thank you for showing me that curiosity and kindness can overcome any misunderstanding," Jake replied. As the ship lifted off and Jake watched the Crystal City grow smaller below, he knew his life had been changed forever. He had crashed on this planet as a lost scientist, but he was leaving as someone much more important, the first bridge between two worlds. The journey back to Earth gave him time to think about everything that had happened. What started as an embarrassing accident with his torn clothes had led to the most important first contact in human history. 6 months later, Jake returned to the Crystal City as Earth's official ambassador. But to the Zolani people, he would always be something more special, their first male friend, and the person who proved that understanding between different peoples was possible. The universe, Jake realized, was full of wonderful surprises for those brave enough to embrace them.